Submit. How you doing? My name is Carlos. I'm a student here at Jones Technical Institute in Jacksonville, Florida. And today's video, we're going to be going over valve adjustments. The motor that we're going to be working on here is the Caterpillar C7. The first thing that we're going to be getting into is removing the timing cover, this oil spout here, the valve cover itself, and the rocker box, so we can get out to the actual valves that we're going to be working at. Okay. For that, we're going to be needing some sockets, ratchets, basic general tools, and we're going to cut that out. And in the next video, we're going to have all this stuff exposed.
This real quick. This is an image of basically what we're going to be working with here. Okay, so this we got our rocker arm that actually, pushes down our valve. The push rods is what moves the rocker arm there, and the tappet down at the end of the push rod goes on the cams, and the cam, obviously, it's a little oblong shape, and as it hits the oblong shape, it pushes up on the rocker arm, which causes that valve to open up. So what we're going to be adjusting is that top screw above the rocker arm right here. Bam. Okay. I just wanted to touch on that real quick so you know I got a better idea on what I'm talking about when we adjust these valves. So here I have pulled up Pro Demand, and I'm actually looking up the procedure for our valve adjusting. Okay, so now we've got the spec for our inlet valve is .015, and the exhaust valve is .025. Okay, and this also tells us our compression stroke and our exhaust strokes and the firing order. Okay, now as we scroll down, we have a picture of the top view of the motor with the rocker box and cover removed. Okay, and then we've got our actual procedures. Okay, and it's saying that we've got a position number 1, piston number 1 at top dead center, and then we're going to adjust cylinders 1, 2, and 4 valve lash according to the table up there. Okay, so basically we're going to loosen our adjustment lock nut. We're going to put our feeler gauge between the rocker arm and the valve bridge, and we're going to rotate the adjustment screw as needed until the feeler gauge has a slight drag on it. And then after that, we're going to tighten our lock nut to the torque spec, which is 22 foot-pounds there. And we're going to make sure that the adjustment screw doesn't move as we're tightening down the lock nut. After we torque it down, we're going to put our feeler gauge back in there to make sure that we're still within spec. And that's the basic procedure for every single one of those valves and how to set every one of them. I've got it written down on my handy dandy paper here. Okay, so we're just going to go get into the motor and start doing our actual valve adjustments. We've got our valve cover off here. Okay, the rocker box is still installed, but our next step before we progress any further is we've got to undo these clips for our injectors here. Okay, because this is all connected to the rocker box itself. So what we're going to do is go through and each one of these remove those connectors, and then we're going to remove our rocker box. Okay. Okay, so we're removing the timing cover right now, but these 2 bolts right here are actually the mount for the air compressor on the backside. So before we remove those, we have to make sure that we're supporting this air compressor so we don't damage it or the gears inside of there. I just want to make a quick note about that, and that's particular to this Caterpillar C7. I got my assistant here. We're turning the motor, and what we're trying to do is line up our timing marks to ensure that we are at top dead center on cylinder number 1. That's where your motor has to be in order to commence any valve adjustments. Okay, so now right here we've got our timing marks. They look like little divots almost in the gears themselves. We're going to line them up, and then up here we should have these, well, you can kind of hear. We got a little bit of free play in there. That means it's ready to set to be adjusted. And these over here are going to be rock hard. Okay. If these are set hard and these got a little bit of play, you know that first cylinder is in top dead center. Okay, so now that we've got our cylinder number 1 at top dead center, we verified that using our timing marks down on the idler gear and the crankshaft gear. We have both of these valves at cylinder 1 closed right now, right? So we've got a little bit of free play in our exhaust and our intake valves here. The 2 feeler gauges that I've got out is our decimal 015 and our decimal 025, which is our specs. Okay, so first off, we're going to set our exhaust valve, and the parts that we're going to be working with is the adjustment screw right here and our lock nut here. Okay, so this actually adjusts the movement of the rocker arm and connecting down to the connecting rod down here, or the push rod, I'm sorry, the push rod down here. And our lock nut just kind of locks it in place, okay? So put this feeler gauge in there. You can see how there's still free play even with the feeler gauge in there, okay? So what we've got to do is we're going to play with this adjustment screw very slowly until we've got a slight drag over the top of our this valve here, okay? So you've got the slight drag there. Get that in place. And then what we would do is use our Allen key to hold the adjustment screw in place. We have a torque wrench already set to spec, which is 22 foot-pounds, okay? And basically we just go over this right here like that. Over here. We're loosening here for whatever reason. Okay? We're just holding it in place too. Got that click. Okay. Now after we torque our lock nut in place, what we've got to do is verify that we've still got that slight drag. Okay. So you should feel a little bit of resistance, but not to the point where you can't move that at all. Okay. So that means that our exhaust here is set. Now we're going to move on, same exact procedure, but we're going to be working on our intake now. Okay. And now this intake is set up on a bridge. We have two intake valves, 1 exhaust valve, okay? And this bridge is setting down on the yoke down in there. We have to put our feeler gauge again over the top of the bridge and between our rocker arm, okay? Now, so you can see the free play there. And again, we're gonna adjust it by hand real quick so we get that slight drag. Okay, we got a little bit of drag there. And then same thing, we're going to use our Allen key to hold it in place while we get our torque wrench out. Tighten down this lock nut here. Torque to spec. Okay, and then go back to your feeler gauge here. Slight drag, feeling awesome. Okay. So that was setting the entire set of valves for cylinder number 1, okay? So now, since we're at top dead center on cylinder 1, and according to our firing order, we can distinguish where or what position all these valves are in along the line here, okay? So the next one that we're going to go ahead and adjust is going to be our intake here on 2. Okay, you see how that's got a little bit of free play? That's where we're going to run our feeler gauge up under there. Our exhaust on 3, a little bit of free play there. That's what we're going to be adjusting. Then 4 intake, see, a little bit of play. And then 5 exhaust. Okay, now we're going to use the exact same procedure to adjust those particular valves that I just pointed out. After we get done doing those, we're going to rotate this motor 360 degrees, okay? The camshaft to crankshaft ratio is 2 to 1, okay? So that means that we have to rotate this motor 360 degrees so we can get back to the next cycle on our strokes, okay? After we do that, we're gonna go ahead and do the entire, all 3 valves on cylinder number 6 and then we're going to go back and do the alternate ones for 5, 4, 3, and 2. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and adjust these, and then the next part will be us cutting to the turning of the motor and doing them back. Okay, so we just finished setting all those valves on cylinders 2 through 5, and now we are rotating the motor back 360 degrees. As you can see, our timing mark is all the way over here on this side now, so we're at 180 degrees.
So we turned our motor 360 degrees. We made these marks on here. All we're doing is turning the crank itself 360 degrees. Again here, like I said, 2-to-1 ratio. Our timing mark is over here. Our gear mark is 180 degrees opposite to it. Okay, so the cam's spun halfway, the crank's spun all the way. Okay, so now that means that our cylinder 1 right now is on its overlap right now. Both of these are tight. Okay, there's no free play in them whatsoever. But on cylinder 6, we've got that slight free play. These valves are open. Okay. Now, opposite to what we had before, where we had cylinder number 1 at top dead center, we had the free play on 1, and cylinder 6 was on its overlap. Okay. So what we're going to go through now is we're going to set the 3 valves for cylinder number 6, and then we're going to do the opposite of what of the order that we just went down this way. Or actually, I should say it's the exact same order. They're just the corresponding valve sequence that we just set. Okay, so if you remember correctly, we set cylinder number 1, and then we set the intake for 2, exhaust for 3, intake for 4, and exhaust for 5. Okay? So now we're going to set these, and we're going to hit the alternate ones, right? So we're going to hit intake for 5, we're going to hit exhaust for 4, we're going to hit intake for 3, exhaust for 2, and that will be leave us with all of these valves with the proper adjustment to them. Again, the exact same procedure. We're going to go over it a little bit more using the feeler gauges, using our hex key on the adjustment bolt, and using our torque wrench, using it for the lock nut. Another thing I haven't touched on too much, but it's important, is you have to make sure that these push rods behind the valves, behind the adjustment screw, are down in their divots, down on the plate, down at the bottom. You can't have them disconnected. You can't have them in a different spot, because that's how you end up with bent push rods or even broken push rods. Okay, so you have to ensure that they are sitting in their place as they should. If you give them a little bit of spin and they don't wiggle around, that means that they're in the little divot. If you have them sliding around, they are not properly seated. And before you progress any further, you have to have them properly seated, okay? So here we're going to be working on the valves for cylinder number 6. We have the valves closed, right? We got a little bit of free play in them. We have our feeler gauges here. We're going to be using the same exact specs. So for the exhaust, we're going to do first. It's decimal 025, right? So you put your feeler gauge up in there. And this actually already has some slight drag in it, so we might not even have to do too much work on this. But still, for the sake of the procedure, we're still going to put in our X key on the top there. And like I said, we've already got our torque wrench set to 22 foot-pounds. We're going to hold the Allen key in place. When you're adjusting here, okay. Let's see. Okay. And then again, you go back to your little feeler gauge. Make sure that you've got that slight drag that you need. Cool. Next, we're going to work onto the intake. Right. So we got to adjust this a little bit to open. Have our feeler gauge in place right there. We have our slight drag. That's a little trickier to hold. Okay. And this one's real fun to try to torque down. It's got kind of a weird angle.
again, we got a little bit of slight drag there. That's exactly what you want. That's proper valve adjustment. Very slight movement in this. I'm gonna go ahead and like I said before, I'm gonna set the other valves down the line, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut to a point where we are at our number two exhaust valve. Okay, so we're gonna do our intake, and exhaust. I'm about to set those 3 valves right now, and we'll come back to our finishing process. Okay, so we have finished off our valve adjustment. Just finished off with cylinder 2 exhaust there. We have put our rocker box back on. We've connected our injectors, pigtails back to the injectors themselves. And we have all of these bolts hand tight in there. Okay, we have a specific torque pattern to follow, and we've already got our torque wrench here set to 10 foot-pounds. Now the torque spec, as ProDemand says, is 79 to 133 inch-pounds. Okay, so that's a little bit over 11. So we've got it set to 10, and all we're going to be doing is clicking it in pattern. Okay, so this 1. 10. Okay, so now we got clicks on all of our bolts for the rocker box here. And basically what you want to do is kind of follow a spiral out kind of formation. So we took it from the middle ones, and we started working alternate until we were all the way out. We're going to follow that same exact procedure when we go to put our valve cover back on. It's got a few more bolts, but same procedure. Like I said, you're going to start in the center, probably start right here, and we'll just work our way out to the corresponding bolts. Okay, so we have just put our valve cover back on. We have these bolts again, hand tightening, and we're going to again follow the same pattern that we had for our rocker box, which is a kind of outward spiral setup, right? So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13 bolts total. Okay, so we've already got our torque wrench set to spec, 97 foot-pounds. We're just going to go ahead and start clipping some of these bolts. Okay. Okay, so we've just tightened our valve cover back in place. We've got everything back in its place, properly connected. We have our valves properly adjusted. This is just a trainer motor, but I mean, in a real life situation, the job will be completed and we move on to the next task at hand, or really get this truck back on the road. Thank you for watching.